The lonely bus stop evening was heavy with silence. Clouds moved slowly across the gray sky, covering the last hints of the setting sun. The street lamps flickered on, spreading a dim orange light that stretched across the pavement. Cars passed by now and then, their headlights cutting through the air like quick flashes. But the corner bus stop remained quiet, almost forgotten. On the old wooden bench, an elderly woman sat alone. Her shoulders were bent forward, and her thin hands clutched a small purse with a broken zipper. She wore a faded brown coat that was buttoned the wrong way, one side higher than the other. Her shoes were worn and loose on her feet. Every part of her looked tired, as if she had walked a long road she could not remember. Her name was Margaret, but no one at the bus stop knew that. To the people who walked past her, she was just an old woman sitting silently, mumbling words. To herself, she stared at the road with glassy eyes, whispering softly, "I need to go home. I need to go home." The words left her lips again and again, like a prayer. But they seemed to vanish into the cold evening air. People came and went. Some stood waiting for the bus, but kept their distance from her. Others passed by, their steps quick, their eyes fixed on the glowing screens of their phones. One woman looked at Margaret for a moment, frowned, then walked away without a word. A man adjusted his headphones and didn't notice her at all. To them, she was invisible, just another figure on a lonely bench. The air grew colder. Leaves swirled around her feet, carried by the restless wind. Margaret shivered and pulled her coat tighter, but her fingers were clumsy and slow. She blinked, looking up at the street signs as though they might tell her something important. But the names of the roads did not make sense to her. They felt strange, like puzzle pieces that no longer fit together. Her memory betrayed her. She could not remember how long she had been sitting there. She could not remember why she had left her house, or even if she still had a house. All she knew was the word home, but the picture of it inside her mind was blurry, fading like smoke. In the wind, the bus arrived with a low rumble. Its brakes screeched as it stopped in front of her. People hurried forward, climbing the steps quickly, eager to escape the cold. Margaret stayed seated. She looked at the number on the front of the bus, but it meant nothing to her. Was it the one she needed? Was it going to the place she called home? She could not be sure. Fear wrapped around her heart, heavy and sharp. She shook her head, and the bus pulled away, leaving her alone again. Her lips trembled. Which one is mine? Where am I supposed to go? Her voice cracked like a fragile branch in the wind. The bench felt harder beneath her, and the world felt larger, more frightening. Streetlights buzzed, cars honked in the distance, and the night seemed to grow darker with every passing minute. Margaret's hand shook as she opened her purse. Inside, there was a small pack of tissues, an old bus ticket, and a folded card with faded letters. She stared at the card, but the writing blurred before her eyes. Her mind felt like a locked door. She sighed, stuffed it back inside, and clutched the purse tightly to her chest. Around her, people still did not stop. Some glanced at her and then quickly looked away, as if afraid that speaking to her would trap them in her confusion. A young man scrolled on his phone and stepped farther from the bench. A woman wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck and crossed the street. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She was not angry. She was not even surprised. She was simply tired. Tired of the silence, tired of the fear, tired of being lost in a world that no longer made sense. She lowered her head and whispered again, "I need to go home." The words drifted into the cold air, but no one answered. Above her, the first star appeared in the night sky, small and faint against the gray clouds. She did not notice it. Her world was too heavy, her thoughts to tangle. All she had was the lonely bench, the cold wind, and the endless waiting for a bus she was too afraid to board. The city moved around her, busy and alive, but the old woman sat frozen in her own quiet struggle. She was a forgotten soul at a forgotten bus stop, hoping that anyone would see her, would hear her, would care. And yet, the night went on, and the elderly woman remained there, small, fragile, and invisible to the crowd. Whispers of confusion. Bus stop grew quieter as the evening stretched deeper into night. The traffic that had once been steady slowed down, leaving long gaps of silence broken only by the distant hum of engines and the occasional bark of a stray dog. The streetlights glowed dimly, painting pale circles on the pavement, but even there, light seemed too far away to comfort the old woman sitting on the bench. Margaret shifted uneasily. Her body was stiff, her back sore from sitting so long on the hard wooden seat. She rubbed her hands together for warmth, but her fingers trembled so much that even the small action felt like work. Her eyes moved from one side of the street to the other, darting like frightened birds as if searching for something familiar. But nothing around her looked right. The shops across the road were closing. Metal shutters rolled down with loud clangs. A woman in a red apron locked a bakery door and hurried away without a glance. At the elderly figure on the bench, the sound of keys jangling echoed in the street and then disappeared, leaving Margaret in deeper silence. She whispered again, her voice breaking, "I need to go home." Where is home? The words spilled out of her without her even thinking. They were not just words, they were the rope she clung to, the only piece of clarity left inside her. But each time she repeated them, the meaning slipped further away. Home. Was it a small house with flowers near the window? Or was it the room she had lived in years ago? She could see flashes in her mind, a door painted blue, a chair by the fireplace, but the pictures broke apart before she could hold them. The confusion in her chest grew heavier. The buses came and went. One roared up, stopping right in front of her, its brakes screeching loudly. The doors hissed open. People stepped forward quickly, tapping their cards, climbing inside. Margaret stared at the number on the front, her lips moving slowly as she tried to read it. She stood halfway up, her knees shaking, then sat back down. Again, her heart raced. What if it was the wrong bus? What if it took her farther away? She couldn't risk it. She remained frozen in place, her fingers clutching her purse until her knuckles turned white. The bus pulled away, leaving a trail of smoke and a deeper emptiness behind. A man standing near the pole glanced at her briefly. She looked back, her eyes pleaded silently, but he looked away quickly, pretending to adjust his watch. Another woman stepped closer to the bench for a moment, then frowned when she heard Margaret whispering. She pulled her coat tighter and walked away as if the old woman's voice were something to be avoided. Margaret's throat tightened. Her whisper grew louder, more desperate. "Please, I need to go home." Where is home? Which bus is mine? Where am I? Her words floated into the night, but no one answered. Her voice was swallowed by the cold air and the indifference of the world. Her chest hurt as fear pushed against her ribs. She felt trapped, not by walls, but by her own mind. Everything looked familiar, but wrong. The signs, the buses, the faces, all were pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. She lifted her purse again and searched inside. Tissues, old tickets, a crumpled candy wrapper, a folded card. She unfolded it slowly, her hands shaking. Letters and numbers stared back at her, but they danced on the page, blurring and moving until she couldn't hold them steady. Tears gathered in her eyes. She stuffed the card back in, frustrated, whispering angrily to herself, "Why can't I remember? Why can't I think?" Her whisper broke into a sob, and she pressed her face into her hands. The night grew colder. Her breath came out in small clouds, vanishing quickly in the air. Every sound seemed louder, now the rattle of the wind against the bus stop sign, the shuffle of footsteps of people passing, the distant honk of cars. Yet none of those sounds brought her comfort. Each one only reminded her how lost she was. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly, their sneakers slapping against the pavement. They noticed her, but only for a second. One of them whispered something to another, and they kept walking, their laughter fading into the distance. Margaret remained on the bench, a lonely figure in the middle of a city too busy to see her. She leaned back, her head resting against the cold metal of the bus stop frame. Her eyes stared up at the streetlight, its buzzing sound steady but harsh. She whispered again, this time softer, as if speaking to the light itself. "I just want to go home." Her voice cracked. The words were nearly swallowed by her own breath, but she kept repeating them. She was not calling to the people around her anymore. She was calling to the universe, to the night, to anyone who would listen, but no one came. The buses still passed. The people still hurried by, and Margaret's whispers filled the air like fragile threads, thin and breaking, yet holding on with all their strength. Her confusion was her prison. Her whispers were her only key, and at that lonely bus stop, the world kept moving, while an old woman sat waiting, hoping someone, anyone, would finally notice. The boy at Pierce Street was quiet now, except for the occasional growl of an engine far in the distance. The cold air pressed heavier against the bus stop, wrapping the world in a silence that felt endless. Margaret sat on the bench, her whispers fading into the wind, her thin body shivering beneath her uneven coat. She looked smaller than ever, like a forgotten shadow in a city that didn't care. And then, From the far end of the street, footsteps approached, light, steady, unhurried. They belonged to a boy no older than 12 walking with a school bag slung loosely across one shoulder. His shoes scraped the pavement with each step, and the streetlight above caught the outline of his face, young but thoughtful, with eyes that looked older than his years. His name was David. He had just finished his after-school program and was heading home, his mind busy with the small things that filled a boy's life and finished homework, his favorite comic book, the sandwich his mother had packed for him. But as he walked closer to the bus stop, those thoughts faded when he noticed the figure. On the bench. The boy slowed down. Something about the woman drew his eyes immediately. She wasn't like the others waiting earlier. She sat hunched over, trembling, whispering words that barely rose above the hum of the street. Her face looked confused, as if she were lost in a maze no one else could see. David had seen people ignore others before. He had seen adults hurry past men asking for directions, past women carrying too many bags, past the homeless who sat quietly on the sidewalk. But this time, he couldn't walk on. Something in his chest wouldn't let him. His mother's words echoed in his head. When you see someone who looks like they need help, don't turn your head. God may have put you there for a reason. He stopped a few feet away, shifting nervously. Should he say something? What if she got upset? What if she didn't want to be bothered? But then he noticed her eyes cloudy, wet with tears, filled with a confusion so deep that it pulled at his heart. The boy took a breath and stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice carrying more kindness than most of the strangers who had passed her all evening. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up slowly. Her eyes flickered as though she didn't understand the question, then settled on his face. For a moment, her lips quivered and no words came out. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered, I don't know where I am." Her words pierced through him. He could hear the fear hidden behind them, the loneliness that had been ignored. All evening. David placed his school bag on the ground and sat down beside her on the cold bench. He made sure not to sit too close, but close enough so she knew she wasn't alone anymore. "That's okay," he said gently, tilting his head to look at her. "You don't have to be scared. I'll stay with you." The woman blinked at him, surprised. All evening, people had rushed past, silent and cold. Yet here was a child choosing to sit beside her as if she were not invisible, as if she still mattered. Margaret's lips trembled again. "I need to go home," she whispered, "but I can't remember where it is." David nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand what she was going through, but he understood enough. She was lost, afraid, and everyone else had left her behind. He reached into his school bag and pulled out a small packet of cookies his mother had given him earlier. "Here," he said, holding it out with both hands, careful not to startle her. "You should eat something. It might make you feel better." Her hands shook as she reached for the packet. She opened it slowly, almost as if she expected it to vanish. When she tasted the cookie, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, the first one she had managed all day. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost broken, but there was warmth in it now. The boy smiled back, a simple, innocent smile that carried more comfort than any passing stranger could give. For a while, they sat in silence. The city moved around them, cars passing, lights glowing, wind stirring leaves across the street. But at the bus stop, a quiet bond was forming. A child had done what grown men and women would not. He had stopped. He had listened. He had cared. Margaret's confusion didn't vanish, but the sharp edge of fear softened. She no longer felt completely alone. Someone was beside her. Someone who saw her not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as a person. David looked at her carefully, noticing the way her coat was buttoned wrong, the way her purse strap was frayed, the way her eyes kept drifting away and then snapping back. He could tell she needed more help than he could give alone, but for now, he gave her the one thing she needed most, a gift of presence. "Don't worry," he said again softly. "We'll figure this out together." The elderly woman's hand trembled as it brushed against his, and for the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. A gentle conversation night had grown colder. The wind moved through the narrow street like a restless spirit, shaking the bus stop sign until it rattled softly. The lamps above buzzed faintly, casting a pale yellow light over the bench where Margaret and David sat. Cars rolled by now and then, their headlights sweeping across the pavement, but none of them slowed. Margaret sat hunched forward, holding the packet of cookies the boy had given her. She nibbled slowly, as though each bite carried more weight than food itself. It carried kindness. Her eyes, tired and clouded, kept glancing toward the boy sitting next to her. He seemed too young to understand her world, yet in that moment, he was the only anchor holding her steady. David kicked his feet lightly against the ground, nervous but determined. He had never been in a situation like this before. He wanted to help, but he wasn't sure how. He only knew one thing: leaving her alone was not an option. Breaking the silence, his small voice reached her again. "Ma'am, what's your name?" Margaret blinked at the question. For a moment, her mind froze, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, after a pause, she whispered, "Margaret." The boy smiled gently, as if her answer was a small victory. "That's a pretty name," he said. "My name is David." Margaret repeated it softly, her voice trembling. "David." Saying his name seemed to calm her, like finding a warm thread in a tangled web. "Do you know where you were going?" David asked carefully. He didn't want to frighten her, but he wanted to understand. Margaret's fingers tightened around her purse. She lowered her eyes, trying to grasp the thought. "Home," she whispered. "I need to go home." Her voice cracked as she looked around, as if the answer might appear in the street signs or the glow of the bus headlights. "But I don't know where it is. I can't remember." David's chest ached. He leaned a little closer, lowering his voice so it was soft and safe. "It's okay. You don't have to remember everything right now. Maybe you have something in your purse, like a card or a paper or something that can help us." Margaret slowly opened her purse again. Her trembling fingers fumbled through tissues and scraps of paper until she found the folded card. She handed it to him with hesitant eyes. David unfolded it carefully. His young eyes read the faded letters, a name, an address, and a phone number, written in slightly shaky handwriting. Relief washed over him. This was something he could use. He looked back at her. "Ma'am, I think this might be your daughter's number," he said. "Do you want me to call her?" Margaret blinked rapidly. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then her lips trembled into a faint smile. My daughter," she whispered. As though the word itself was a fragile treasure, she nodded weakly. Yes, please." David tucked the card safely in his pocket for a moment, then reached for his small phone. He wasn't sure if his mother would be upset about him using his minutes, but he knew what she would say if she were standing there. "You did the right thing." Before dialing, he glanced at Margaret. "It's going to be okay," he reassured her. "I'll talk to her. We'll get you home." The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. No stranger had spoken to her this way all evening. No one had looked at her like she mattered. But this boy, this child, was treating her as if she were precious, as if she were someone worth saving. For a moment, silence stretched between them again, broken only by the rustle of leaves swirling around their feet. Margaret reached out shakily and touched the boy's sleeve. "You're a kind boy," she whispered. "Most people, they don't stop. They don't see me." David looked at her and shook his head. "I see you," he said simply, "and I'm not going anywhere." Her lips quivered, but this time it was not just confusion, it was gratitude. They sat together on the bench, a fragile old woman and a boy with a brave heart. Around them, the city carried on. Buses rumbled past, footsteps hurried by, laughter and shouts echoed in the distance. But in that small circle of light beneath the street lamp, a gentle conversation stitched two lives together. One was fading, losing pieces of memory to the shadows of illness. The other was still growing, his innocence untarnished, his compassion shining bright, and somehow, in that unlikely moment, they became each other's strength. David held the phone tightly in his hand, preparing to do something no one else had bothered to try. The night was about to change. The unthinkable act night deepened, and the city's heartbeat slowed. Shops were closed now, their shutters pulled down like heavy eyelids. The street lamps glowed in pale circles, buzzing faintly in the silence. Margaret sat quietly on the bench, her frail hands folded over her purse, her cloudy eyes still carrying traces of fear. Yet beside her sat David, and his presence had changed the air. The boy glanced down at the folded card in his hand. The numbers were faint, but still clear enough to read. He hesitated for a moment, chewing on his lip. He was only 12. He wasn't supposed to make calls to strangers at night. But then he looked at Margaret, her trembling fingers, her lost expression, and his decision became solid. He had to do something. David pulled his small phone from his pocket, His thumbs moved slowly as he dialed the number. The phone felt heavier than usual, as if he was carrying not just plastic and metal, but responsibility. He glanced at Margaret, giving her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll find your way home." The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered, cautious and tired. "Hello." David cleared his throat, his voice shaky but steady enough. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is David. I'm at the bus stop on Pine Street. I think your mom is here. She looks really lost." There was silence on the other end. Then suddenly, a sharp intake of breath. The woman's voice trembled. "My mom, are you sure? What does she look like?" David turned to look at Margaret. Her hair was silver and thin, falling across her face. Her coat was buttoned unevenly. She stared at him, waiting for his words. "She's wearing a brown coat," David said softly, "and she keeps saying she wants to go home. Her name is Margaret." The voice on the phone broke into tears. Yes, that's her. Oh my God. Thank you. Please, don't leave her. I'll come right away. I'll be there in 10 minutes. David nodded quickly, though the woman couldn't see him. "I'll stay," he promised. "She's safe with me." When he hung up, his small chest rose and fell with relief. He turned to Margaret and smiled. "Your daughter is coming. She'll be here soon." Margaret blinked, confused at first. Then her lips curved into the faintest smile. Her eyes watered. "My daughter," she whispered, as though tasting the word. She shook her head slowly. "I thought I had lost her." "No," David said firmly. "She's coming. You're not alone anymore." Margaret lowered her head, tears slipping down her wrinkled cheeks. The boy's words touched something deep inside her, a place where confusion could not reach, where love still lived. For the first time in hours, her fear loosened its grip. David sat quietly beside her. He didn't fidget, didn't rush, didn't look at his phone again. He simply stayed. Every few minutes he said something gentle. "It's okay. The bus isn't important now, or your daughter is on her way, or simply, you're safe." And each time, Margaret nodded faintly, as though each word was a light guiding her out of the fog. Minutes passed. The world around them barely noticed. A bus roared by without stopping. A man hurried across the street with a bag of groceries. A couple laughed loudly as they walked past, too busy to see the fragile scene on the bench. But for Margaret, the city had shrunk to one thing, the boy who stayed. She turned her head slowly, studying him. You are a good boy," she whispered. "Why did you stop?" Everyone else walked away. David shrugged gently, his voice quiet but honest. "Because my mom says when someone needs help, you don't look away. You stop. You do something." Her lips trembled again, but this time it wasn't just from confusion. It was gratitude, pure and heavy. "Your mother raised you well," she said softly. The boy smiled shyly and looked down at his shoes, embarrassed, but proud. Together, they waited. The night seemed less cold now, less sharp. Margaret leaned slightly against the back of the bench, her body still shaking, but her spirit calmer. The fog in her mind was still there, but a thread of hope pulled her forward. Then, from down the street, headlights cut through the dark. A car turned sharply and slowed near the bus stop. The sound of tires crunching against the pavement made Margaret's eyes widen. David stood quickly, gripping his bag. "I think that's her," he said. The car stopped, and the door burst open. A woman rushed out, her face pale with fear, her eyes scanning wildly until they landed on the bench. "Mom," she cried, her voice breaking. Margaret gasped, her body stiffened, then softened as tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered the word again, this time with relief, with love. "Daughter." And in that moment, the unthinkable act of a 12-year-old boy had bridged the gap between despair and reunion. A warm goodbye. Car door slammed shut, echoing across the quiet street. The woman rushed forward, her shoes clattering against the pavement, her arms already reaching out. Her face was pale with worry, but her eyes glowed with fierce love. "Mom," she cried again, her voice shaking. Margaret looked up, her body trembling. For a long second, her confused mind fought with the scene before her. The figure running toward her looked both familiar and strange, like a dream trying to take shape. But then the woman's arms wrapped around her, warm and desperate, and Margaret's tears flowed freely. "My baby," Margaret whispered weakly. I thought I lost you." Her daughter, Ruth, held her tighter, her shoulders shaking. No. Mom, you didn't lose me. I've been looking for you everywhere. I was so scared. She pulled back just enough to cup her mother's face, brushing away the tears. You're safe now. I've got you. David stood quietly beside the bench, watching the reunion with wide eyes. His chest felt heavy, but it wasn't sadness. It was something else, something bigger. He realized he was witnessing a moment few people ever see, the power of love finding its way back through fear and confusion. Ruth turned suddenly, her gaze falling on the boy. Her eyes softened instantly. She stepped forward, still holding her mother's hand. Are you the one who called me? She asked, her voice breaking with gratitude. David shifted shyly, clutching the strap of his bag. Yes, ma'am, he said softly. She looked lost. I didn't want her to be alone. Ruth's face crumpled. She pulled him into a hug, surprising him. You don't know what you've done. She whispered fiercely. You gave me my mother back. Tonight. Thank you. Thank you. David stood stiff for a moment, not used to such emotion, then relaxed into the embrace. He nodded when she pulled away. I just did what I thought was right, he said, his voice small but sure. Ruth smiled through her tears. That makes you braver than most adults I know. Margaret, still sitting on the bench, reached her hand out. Her fingers trembled as they touched David's. You stayed with me, she whispered. When everyone else walked away, you stayed. David swallowed hard, his eyes shining. I told you, I wasn't going anywhere. The three of them stood there for a moment, bound together by something stronger than the cold night air. Then, cars passed, people hurried by, the city kept moving. But here, at this forgotten bus stop, time felt different, softer, sacred. Ruth helped her mother to her feet, wrapping her coat securely around her. Margaret leaned into her daughter's arm, her steps unsteady but full of relief. Before getting into the car, Ruth turned to David again. Do you live nearby? She asked. David nodded. Yes, just a few blocks away. She smiled warmly. Then, maybe we'll see you again. I'd like to thank your parents too. They should know they've raised a remarkable boy. David blushed, shaking his head. My mom just says, when you see someone who needs help, you stop. Ruth's eyes glistened. Wise words, and you listen to them. She opened the car door, guiding her mother inside. Margaret turned her head once more, her frail face lit by the car's interior light. Goodbye, David, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. David smiled softly, lifting his hand in a small wave. Goodbye, ma'am. Get home safe. The car door closed gently. The engine started, and the headlights swept across the pavement as the car pulled away. David stood still, watching until the red taillights faded into the distance, leaving only the faint hum of the city behind. For a long moment, the bus stop was silent again. The bench was empty, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. Something had changed. The night felt warmer, lighter, as though the kindness shared there had left an invisible glow. David picked up his bag and began walking home. His steps were slower now, thoughtful. He wasn't sure if the world would remember what had happened that night, but he would, and maybe, just maybe, Margaret would too. In the quiet corners of her memory, the boy walked under the streetlights, his shadow stretching long and thin. He was just 12 years old, but he had done something many older and stronger had not. He had stopped, he had listened, and he had given a lost soul dignity and love. The night moved on. The city carried its endless rhythm, but in one small corner, an extraordinary act of kindness had bloomed. An elderly woman had found her way home. A daughter had found her mother, and a boy, a simple boy with a brave heart, had proven that sometimes the smallest voices make the loudest difference. And though the world hurried past, the story of that bus stop would live quietly in the hearts of those three souls forever.